On today's show, the Hawks' losing streak is over at 4 games. It was a close-fought victory in Memphis, but it was a win nonetheless. We'll get into how it unfolded and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2148 of the Locked On Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening into Thursday here in late January. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. Before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app. See what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And today, we'll be diving into what became a 124-122 road win for the Atlanta Hawks, snapping a 4-game losing streak. It was getting pretty dire. The vibes were not particularly awesome around the Hawks the last couple of days after a near win, I will say, on Monday. By the way, if you listen to that podcast, you will already know this, but please, if you missed it, check out that podcast on that about that game in the same podcast feed you're listening or watching this podcast. But the Hawks were better in that game on Monday, and some of the fruits of that labor came to fruition in this spot because the Hawks, in their 26th road game of the year, which is the most in the NBA, they've been on the road all season long. They were actually small underdogs in this game. And then they had a disastrous start. They were down 12-1 to begin the game, but then responded very well, played extremely well after that point, clawed back, led for a decent chunk of this one. It was very close, pretty much the entire second half. And then the Hawks executed pretty darn well down the stretch to escape with a 2-point win, despite a shot in the air from Memphis that could have won it at the buzzer. It was not a good shot, so it was good defense, and the Hawks were able to get a badly needed win on the road. So if you are not familiar with the podcast, what we do early on in the show, generally after games, is talk about the big picture takeaways and the analysis of what transpired in this game. And look, big picture, the Hawks losing 4 games in a row, it was a all sides struggle for the Hawks to some degree, but the offense had been struggling. We can be honest about that. Now, they were better against Milwaukee, which I tried to say in responsible, process-driven fashion on Monday. The Hawks just missed every shot basically in the first half, and the process was better, which the Hawks, by the way, their coaching staff shared the same sentiment with Matt Weiner on the broadcast. We talked about how they had some of their best shot quality of the season, and I shared that on the podcast on Monday as well. Like the offense the process was pretty good on Monday, but before that, they had 3 pretty disastrous offensive games and not a lot of flow going on. But in this game, the results were quite positive on offense, and that kind of led to what transpired overall. They had nearly a 120 offensive rating in this game on the road against a pretty competent Grizzlies team. Yes, they're banged up too. The Grizzlies are very hurt, but they did have a lot of their core guys in this game. Morant, Jared Jackson, Jalen Wells, etc. played in this one, so they weren't like a total walking wounded unit. And it's a road game. It is what it is. Like the Hawks executing well matters #1 basically on the list. And a big reason for that was some regression to the mean, and I mean that this time in a positive direction. The Hawks went 20 of 45 from 3. That's 44% on big volume. That's not insanely hot, but certainly a good shooting night for the Hawks, and they were due for one of those after what happened in the first half against Milwaukee on Monday. Only the 6th time this season the Hawks have made at least 23s in a game, so 1 out of every 7.5 games they make 23s, and they did it in this game. They actually were not great inside the arc. In fact, they were pretty terrible at the rim. Dyson Daniels, who I love and who did a lot of things well in this game, just could not make a shot within about 6 feet in this one. He wasn't alone, but the Hawks were very poor inside the arc. They had one of their lowest points in the paint marks in a while in this game. But everything else, and 3-point shooting was certainly a big part of that, was able to overcome that. They had 34 assists. The ball moved very well in this game, I thought, much better than it had been at times in the last few games. Turned the ball over 17 times, probably more than you would want in a game like this, but it was kind of a fast-paced game, and after things calmed down a little bit early on, they were better, other than Okongwu was kind of kicking the ball around today with 7 turnovers, but elsewhere they were okay in that area. It wasn't a disaster, and they put up 18 second chance points, which is a big number for the Hawks. They're never going to be a prolific second chance team on the offensive glass this season with the way that they are built, but they were able to do a little bit of that today, which was very helpful in this spot. And Jalen Johnson was definitely the clear standout in this game. He is the headliner, 32 points, 15 rebounds, 8 assists, a strong game performance from him. He had been struggling a little bit earlier in the losing streak, and then as the whole team did, played much better in the second half against Milwaukee on Monday, and then sprungboard off of that to this game, to where he was very good, especially on offense throughout this one. But still, beyond that, there was some balance. They actually had 8 guys score at least 7 points. everyone that played scored for Atlanta. Even Christian Koloko, who made his Hawks debut in this spot, gave the Hawks a big 3 late in the game, which is kind of surprising. It was kind of a weird game as far as like whistles are concerned. Monday, they let everything go, the officiating crew, and my guy Glenn Willis was pointing this out in real time, frequent guest on the podcast, and one of the guys from ATL on 29. But there was basically nothing called on Monday. It was a lot of free flow, a lot of physical play on both sides. And today it was the exact opposite of that. A lot of free throws, a lot of fouls. Both teams got called for 23 plus fouls individually in this game. That's a lot of fouls, but a lot of stoppages, kind of not a ton of flow to this one. But I will say it was fairly evenly distributed, I thought, just kind of a different flow to the game. But the Grizzlies got to the line 27 times. If not for that, the Hawks defense would have been even better in this one. They ended up with like a league average defense as far as the overall numbers are concerned, like a 115 or so defensive rating in this game. There was a pretty rough third quarter in which the Hawks got bludgeoned a little bit defensively, similar to what happened against Milwaukee, honestly, where they had a couple of bad moments and bad stretches that led to some relatively ugly numbers in that quarter. But other than the third quarter, the Hawks were very solid to better than that defensively. They forced 18 turnovers. They made Memphis go one-on-one quite a bit, and that was largely successful, I think, on defense in this game. Their one Achilles heel was the defensive glass. That's been the case most of the year. They actually had a shockingly positive rebounding game on Monday in a near win, but today it was back to kind of the norm in a bad way, giving up 22nd chance points to Memphis. But look, it didn't kill them too badly, and I think other than a couple of loose moments from Morant, there wasn't like a lot of breakdowns happening for the defense. There were some open threes being allowed in that third quarter for sure, and Press's mistakes, like, ironically, Jalen Johnson had kind of a rough game on defense, despite his offensive heroics in this one. Individually, we'll get into that later on, but look, on the whole, the Hawks just need to get this win. I'm not a fan of like reductive analysis. Generally speaking, I like to give you the whole picture. On Monday, I was accused, and I think I saw this coming a mile away, of being too positive about what transpired on Monday. And I tried to isolate on that podcast. I'll say it again now. Like, I did say the vibes were really bad because you lose 4 games in a row and you lose on, in front of a packed house on MLK Day, and nobody's in a good mood after that. But there was stuff to be positive about from that game. The Hawks played better than they actually performed as far as the numbers are concerned, because they just couldn't make a shot for so long. But if you watch the way the game unfolded, they were okay as far as how they actually played in the game. And that definitely, I think, came over to today. They weren't perfect in this game. They were, again, small underdogs at FanDuel, but to go on the road and get a win against a competent opponent, not a great opponent by any means, but certainly a competent one. And look, just stopping the bleeding of a losing streak is a big thing. Like, you don't want to let things spiral. We already saw this once this year with the Hawks, where things got out of control for a little while, and the losses piled up when they lost 7 games in a row, including a bunch of home losses, and the vibes were pretty dire at the end of the year because of that losing streak. And look, now we're post the big Trae Young trade. The deadline is still looming. We're kind of in that in-between part of the schedule where it's like, all right, what is this team? And that's a question the Hawks still have to answer. But number one, the first thing is like just stacking a victory was basically very important. And the Hawks getting one tonight was not to be understated. So they played pretty well. They executed well down the stretch, which we'll talk about later on in the game. And overall, just a badly needed win for this Hawks team to kind of save where they were, trending in the wrong direction. Still have maybe not like title hopes this season by any means, but I think realistic playoff hopes are still there. I know there's been a lot of, I think, understandable frustration and maybe downplaying of this team's chances to make any sort of run, and I totally understand that. But I'll just say this again. They have a pretty easy schedule, and if they can kind of get a little bit healthier with Ricochet, Porzingis, etc., they can still win some basketball games, and we saw that a little bit tonight. And also on the bright side, to end this first segment, the Pelicans lost, which is always nice for the Hawks for draft purposes. And currently, as I'm recording this podcast, the Bucks are losing by double digits to Oklahoma City. So it could be a very good night for the Hawks, generally speaking, in New Orleans. As a little taste here, they've lost 14 of 16, and they have the most losses in the NBA right now. So that's a nice little cherry on top of a good night overall for Atlanta with a road win in Memphis. Okay, in a second, I'll talk about how this game unfolded, my more granular analysis. Rotation changes for Atlanta, including Christian Koloko making his debut, etc. And it's coming up in just one moment. Fridays feel different right now during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better at the moment. On Friday nights, before the actual basketball gets going, FanDuel is giving fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action actually begins. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour brings something new to the table when it comes to boosts or bonuses or surprises. It's so easy to check out the weekly specials before tip-off and make a move before the window even closes. And Happy Hour adds a little bit of extra energy to your Friday night basketball routine. The timing is also perfect, honestly. It happens right before the games begin and before the weekend actually gets underway as well. And it's Friday nights from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It's become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Plus, FanDuel still has everything that you're looking for in the live space, as well as pregame lines, a full suite of offerings for all the sports that you like as well: football, baseball, they have hockey, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and so much more. Before tip-off on Friday nights, check out the FanDuel app. It's dropping during NBA Happy Hour. It's every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. A little bit of basketball, a little bit of action, a whole lot of Friday energy. That is NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, thank you as always. Make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. If you ever want to go ad-free, you can do so now by joining the Everydayer Club, and you can find out more about that by going to lockedonhawks.supercast.com. I appreciate the support as always on the podcast, whether you are an everyday or just joining us for the first time. We appreciate you being here. And we'll dive in now to how this game kind of unfolded in a more granular way. The Hawks actually, it seems like a long time ago now, as I'm recording this podcast late Wednesday night, they had a disastrous start to this game. It was 12-1. At the first time out, the Hawks came out of the locker room and turned them all over the first 3 times they came on the floor. Not what you want. Then they missed 3 straight shots to begin the game as well. Missed a free throw. Okongwu had a rough kind of up and down game, but he was important in a few different moments. He actually scored the next 8 points on 3 possessions for the Hawks at a badly needed time early in this game. He kind of waxed and waned again, but that was a big stretch for him. And then the Hawks hit some threes and got going a little bit, which was certainly well needed after the slow start. Rotationally, no huge surprises, but there is one very notable change. So, first things first, McCollum and Gay were the first 2 subs. No surprise there. Corey Kispert started again at 3 in place of V. Krejci. That's kind of the norm now. Kispert didn't play very much, but he is the more traditional, we'll say, small forward option in the absence of Ricochet. That's kind of been okay recently. Then Luke Kennard came in as the 8th man. As a reminder, he played in Memphis the last couple of years before this year, and then he signed with the Hawks this summer. Luke had a massive first half, and by all accounts was jawing in a fun way with everybody in Memphis. I'm sure he got a lot of guys that he played with and probably knows very well. And sometimes you can actually talk more trash to your friends than your enemies, and that was probably the case for Luke today. He was actually really good early on. And then the other note that I wanted to mention is that Asa Newell was assigned to College Park. Now, that actually happened earlier on this week. He went to College Park, played in a game. They actually went back to Atlanta. But today, College Park played a home game at the same time that the Hawks were playing in Memphis. And the Hawks chose to have Asa stay in College Park. Now, I got questions about that. Understandably, Asa, first-round pick, has been playing this season. I didn't have a problem with this. I thought it was pretty okay to do. I wonder, and the Hawks don't tend to show this information, I do wonder if it was like hey, we want to give Koloko a chance. I'll talk about that more in a second. Maybe it was the front office saying, like, if we don't send Asa to Memphis, Koloko has to play in that case. I don't really know what the background was on that, but Newell played a lot in the G League tonight. I have no problem with him getting some dedicated playing time. I think he has played more than he probably should have this season, given the fact that Porzingis has been out so much. I think Asa would have played a lot less if not for the injuries, which is fine. He's been totally fine. Defensively, it's been an adventure for Asa, but that's kind of normal for a rookie big man. But I did not have a problem with this. Now, we'll see if they do this more often, but I think with the way that Koloko played, that was a justified decision, and that's where we'll leave it for now. At any rate, away from the rotation, the Hawks were down by 1 in the first quarter. They made 7 threes in the opening period and were actually losing because of that slow start. They attempted 16 threes in the first quarter. That's a ton of attempts. They weren't quite able to keep that rate up the whole game, but they were definitely on the higher side of attempts as well as makes in this one. Part of that was that Kennard was awesome early on, as I mentioned before. He made his first 6 shots in this game at 16 points in the first half. Definitely jawing back and forth. The Hawks had a possession where they actually had 4 offensive rebounds on the same trip because of and before Dice actually made his one and only field goal of the game. Mo Gay and John Morant were, let's just say, sharing some pleasantries with each other in the middle of the second quarter. They got double technical fouls. I'm not sure why Mo got a technical foul, honestly. That was seemingly the wrong call from my vantage point. Morant very plainly shoves Mo Gay in the back, which is why he got his. I don't know why Mo got his. I guess maybe they said something on a jersey grab. Seemed kind of light on Mo's side, but anyway, Mo is not afraid to mix it up. That's been evident all year long. I think it's good to have a guy like that who's like not afraid at all to like jaw and get in somebody's face. The Hawks don't really have that like traditional enforcer, like big bruiser type. And Mo is obviously quite skinny, but he is not afraid, which I definitely appreciate about Mo in the front court. As for Koloko, by the way, he debuted today after signing a two-way on Friday. He is the most traditional center on the roster, sans Porzingis, obviously, size-wise. Like he's a legitimate 6'11", 7-footer, defensive anchor type. Had a dunk pretty quickly in this game. Got called for some, actually at least one moving screen in this one. He's not a great player, but he is an NBA level player who's been on a few different teams. He's one of those guys that's like, hey, if you can get this guy available on a two-way contract, go ahead and bring him in and give the Hawks a different look at center. He just is a center in the way that Mo Gay and Asa Newell are not, which was helpful in this game. Nikhil got called for a flopping technical foul, which is a very rare thing to see. And also wasn't that blatant. That was kind of a weird call against him. The Hawks were up by 7 at the end of the first half after a nice bounce back offensively. Jalen was really good and assertive offensively, and then the Hawks had 19 assists in the first half despite the slow start. But then they had their second straight cold spell coming out of the locker room. They were 1 of 9 from the field to begin the third quarter, and the Grizzlies went on a 13-4 run, their biggest in the entire game, basically, to take the lead. Kisper made a 3. That was a big shot to stop the bleeding a little bit. But as I mentioned before, defensively, that was kind of their worst stretch of the game. They allowed 29 points in about 8.5 minutes to begin the second half. 18 of those were right at the rim in the paint. A lot of like pretty straight line drives for layups, some bad rotations mistakes. I'm thinking one right now from Jalen. I'm picturing in my head. Okongwu, same thing. Like it was kind of a messy defensive stretch for sure. Now they were okay on offense, and there were 7 lead changes in the third quarter alone. It was a lot of back and forth, and that was their worst defensive quarter. They had like a 140 defensive rating in the third quarter, but they were able to stay in the game and be down only 1 going to the fourth. In fact, it was an incredibly tight game for a very long time. Neither team had a lead of more than 3 points for 10.5 minutes. Late in the third, all the way to like the middle of the fourth, nobody had control by more than 1 possession. That tells you how close this game was down the stretch. The Hawks did take finally took the bigger lead there. Notably, Koloko hit a 3 at 7-minute mark. That was his 1 attempt of the game from deep, but he had not made a 3 in an NBA game since December of 2022. So that was a shocking shot and make at a big spot for the Hawks, honestly. He was 1 of 17 in his NBA career across 4 seasons from 3, but hey, it went in, and that was a big shot, especially because V had just got a technical foul. It was kind of not a disaster stretch, but certainly not one that was pretty, we'll say, for the Hawks. They were down by 2, going with a timeout with like 5.5 minutes to go. So they were kind of rocking the wrong direction after being not in control, but certainly having the lead. Then a 7-0 run came to the table. Okongwu made a 3. That was his first shot in a while. That was a big shot. And then Nikhil hit 2 threes pretty quickly that were massive shots. He had been in a cold spell in this game. Actually had his streak of consecutive games with a 3 up to 37 now. That was very much in danger till the fourth quarter. Memphis got back in the game. But with the Hawks up by 2, Okongwu had similarly finished a 3-point play that would have given the Hawks a pretty commanding advantage at that point in time. But he got called for an offensive foul. That would have been his 6th foul. So it was challenged between that and the fact that the shot went in. So it was a 3-point swing and the foul out. So Quinn challenges it. As soon as the replay goes up, I was like, oh, they're going to lose this challenge. And they did. So I don't mind challenging that, but it was not a likely overturn. It was just a big enough play, and it was late enough in the game where it wasn't too bad to challenge it, just a loss there. And then after that challenge, they allowed a layup to Jock Landale after Okongwu fouled out. So then Jalen turns it over on a pick 6. That was a bad moment for him, reminiscent of Monday night. So the lead went from like, hey, the Hawks might be up by 6 or 7 to up by 1, like very, very quickly. And then McCollum and Cedric Coward traded threes. So the Hawks are up by 1 point with about a minute to go, and nothing is assured whatsoever. But Jalen Johnson beats Ja Morant on a switch. Ja cannot defend Jalen Johnson, and I think Jalen knew that and kind of alluded to that on the walk-off interview with Matt Weiner. But Jalen scores over Ja to go by 3. Then the Hawks ended up fouling Jock Landale on a layup attempt. That was the right decision at that point in time. They were kind of beat, so a foul there is the right play. He misses both, but Atlanta's rebounding weaknesses came to the forefront, and they got called for a loose ball foul against Jaren Jackson. But Jaren goes to the line, makes the first, and then misses the second one. But the Hawks do get the rebound the second time, and they go with they have the ball now off the rebound, up by 2 with 27 seconds remaining. And that's a big number to keep in mind because the shot went off, and they were credited with the rebound at the 27.4 second mark, according to the official box score. Now, most teams in that spot, down 2, with that narrow of a differential, are going to foul. But Memphis did not. Now, it's not totally insane to not foul. They had 3+ seconds, but that's not normal behavior, I would say. It kind of worked for them because Jalen almost sealed the game with a jumper with like 8 seconds to go. Probably could have run it down. I think that's a shot he makes a lot, just didn't make it at that point in time. For me in that spot, if it's hard to say this on the fly, and nobody has perfect hindsight in real time, of course. Ideally, what you do there with that short of a differential is that if you shoot the ball like basically at the buzzer of the shot clock, you're going to win the game like 99% of the time. Make or miss because of the timing of a shot. Like if you shoot it with even 3.94 seconds to go, if you shoot it, miss, off the rim, rebound, they had a timeout, but you get the rebound with like 1.5, maybe you advance the ball, or you might make a shot regardless. Jalen shot a little bit too early, which was fine. It was a decent look. He just didn't make it. So that gave Memphis a chance again. But then surprise number 2 for Memphis is that they did not call timeout. They had a timeout that would advance the ball immediately. And, if you want to go live, some coaches might prefer that. But Morant kind of pushes it, loses the ball a little bit, kind of gets off track, and then has to launch a makeable, but certainly a forced heave-like 3 at the buzzer. A pretty wild shot. And I thought it might go in because that's just the mind of an Atlanta sports watcher. But it didn't go in, and the Hawks escaped with the win. So there was a lot going on there down the stretch, I have to say. But Atlanta did score effectively when they had to. So they had, I believe it was 16 points in the last 5.5 minutes of this game, which is what you want to see. They didn't really have a lot of lulls. There were some empty possessions. The only possession in the entire crunch time period that was pretty rough was the Jalen turnover that led to the layup run out by Ja with 1:40 to go. But other than that, McCollum had a huge 3 to go up by 4. Jalen made that big mid-range jump shot that kind of was the game winner in some respects. So it wasn't perfect, but 2 games in a row now, the Hawks have been better offensively when they needed to be. Until, obviously Monday they had the one bad moment at the very end with McCollum, but they did a good job in this game and managed to once again escape with a win. All right, in a second, some more analysis of the actual individual players in this one, headlined by Jalen Johnson, as well as the debut of Koloko, Kennard's big game in Memphis, and more. And it's coming up in just one moment. New year, new systems. This is the time of year when a lot of people in my life, and even myself, look at the messy parts of how we run our businesses and think there just has to be a better way to do things. And now there actually is. With your communications being streamlined, it's one of the biggest upgrades you can actually make to your business. And that's why today's show is brought to you by the folks at Quo. It's spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you are actually creating more opportunities to connect with your customers. And I love how Quo makes everything so simple. Your whole team can actually call and text from the same business number, so nothing actually gets missed along the way. Everyone sees the full thread, which makes replying faster and more personal. It works right from your phone or from your computer as well. You can even keep existing numbers if you prefer to. And Quo also has smart AI tools that automatically log your calls, summarize them as well, highlight next steps, and so much more so that you actually never have details slip through the cracks. It's no surprise at all. The Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses from solo operators to growing teams. You can make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away from you. And try Quo for free. You get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnba. That's QUO.com/lockedonnba. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, until the breakdown of the players in this game, 10 guys appeared for Atlanta. The only healthy, active player who did not get in the game tonight for the Hawks was Keaton Wallace. That's okay with me, given the available talent. Keaton basically seems like he's only going to play when there's somebody out between McCollum, Dyson, and Nikhil. And that's probably the right approach given where they are roster-wise right now. Christian Koloko, I mentioned before, recent two-way signing, a guy who is not like a first-year player, was drafted with a top 35 pick a few years ago, is a real NBA caliber big. Not going to change your life, but certainly someone who can play defense, provide size, rim protection, etc. He had 5 points in 11 minutes in this game, a steal, a block, was +7, and I was particularly impressed with his defense. Now, he's not going to be Wemby on defense, but he is a real center. And while Mo Gay does similar things defensively, Mo is much more of a havoc creator, secondary rim protector guy who plays the 4, whereas Koloko is more classically trained at the 5, a little bit bigger than Mo, like stout-wise. I think just is a more comfortable player at that position. So a question I got as the game was ending from a listener that I can't remember the name now, so my apologies, is basically like, will we see Koloko again? And my guess is yes. I don't know why you wouldn't see him again. Now, if Porzingis is back soon, then in a game with Porzingis and Okongwu, I think you probably won't see Koloko, nor probably should you. But if Porzingis is out, which is going to be out for at least a couple more games, given the timeline the Hawks gave on Monday, I think that Koloko makes sense in the role he was in tonight. Like, he might not play as much as he did today. Okongwu struggling and having foul trouble might have led to a little bit more play for Koloko than he actually got. But also, the Grizzlies only played one true center in this game. It was Jock Landale. If you're facing a team that has more size, you might even need him more than today. So big picture, like the Hawks play on Friday against the Suns at home. If you ask me, will Koloko play? I would say yes. I think he probably should. So we'll see how that goes. And it's not to say that he's a, quote, better player than Asa Newell. I saw that today as well. Like, why would the Hawks play this guy who they just signed over their first round pick? And my answer to that is very simple. They're not the same position. Asa Newell is a power forward at this point, like very clearly. He has been asked to play center, not his fault. I think that's because of injuries. Asa defensively at center is just not ready for that. And a quick way to have a bad defense in the NBA is to have a bad defensive center. And that's where they don't want to be. So Asa Newell has a much, much, much higher ceiling in the NBA than Christian Koloko does. But right now, on defense in particular, Koloko is light years ahead of Asa and is much more of a center. So for positionally, what they need without Porzingis, they just kind of need Koloko more. That's kind of the simple explanation. Hopefully that makes sense on some level. Elsewhere, B. Krejci had a nice game. He had been a little bit quiet and actually got a three-pointer to fall. I mentioned before, I think on Monday, that he had been 6 of 32 from 3 in like a 6-game stretch. He made his only attempt today. He was still pretty quiet, had a technical foul that was kind of an odd play in the backcourt, but 7 points in 11 minutes. I think Vita has definitely been surpassed, it seems, in the current rotation by both Kennard and Kispert. That's probably the right move, given the way the Vita's been playing, but he was a little bit better in this game. Mo Gay, 7 points, 3 fouls, 2 assists, a rebound. He made a couple shots on offense today, at 3 for 7 from the floor. I think he was fine, solid, played a little bit of backup center, but a little bit less than he has been because of Koloko playing. And I did think at one point they might actually just go with 3 bigs the entire game because Koloko didn't come in until like 5 minutes left in the first half. But that was the kind of the right differentiation, I think, because when Memphis was playing Landale, they probably needed to go back to Koloko, and they did in this game. McCollum, 15 points, 6 assists for TJ, +5. I think he has definitely been better on offense the last 2 games. I know that everyone got mad, understandably so, about the last play on Monday. But before that, he had been playing better and more in the offense during that game against Milwaukee. And today, like, he's still taking a bunch of shots. 14 shots is fine for him, but 6 assists, move the ball much better. I think is kind of just fitting in a little bit more than he was when he was kind of all you can eat the last couple of games before this weekend. But defensively, it's an adventure. I was asked during the game, like, hey, is McCollum an upgrade on Trey on defense? I'm like, kind of, but not by a lot, which is says a lot about both guys. They're both bad defenders. But yeah, McCollum at least was more under control, didn't make mistakes, and has to be guarded at a big level. So certainly bringing him in does help to raise the floor of a second unit in particular. Luke Kennard was brilliant in the first half in particular. 18 points on 9 shots for Luke, 4 threes. He obviously was in a kind of an aggressive posture. He was actually asked in the walk-off interview at halftime, like what was different about that. He basically said he's playing with confidence. Like, yeah, let it fly. And when he's playing like that, he's impressive. And he's comfortable in Memphis, obviously, but had the 2 assists, 4 rebounds, had 2 steals, +5. Like, he was huge. When the Hawks were not playing all that well in the first half, he was a big part of keeping things afloat because the starting backcourt, shot the ball terribly in this game, but Luke and CJ honestly helped to like raise the floor of that offense a little bit more because of what Dyson and Nikhil were not doing for a lot of the game. Speaking of, Dyson had a very rough offensive game. He was excellent defensively, like excellent, as he often is. But 3 points, 8 assists, which is not a small thing, led the team along with Jalen, 7 rebounds. He's still, by the way, I say this somewhat regularly on the podcast, but he's still comfortably the team leader in offensive rebounds as the point guard, which is crazy, but he's good at that. But he was 1 of 9 from the field, and they were all within like 10 feet. He just could not get a layup, not a straight layup, like floater range shots in particular, like 5-footers. Nothing was falling for Dyson. And usually he's good at that shot. He's been effective with that shot for 2 years now, but man, it was just not there today at all, and that definitely hurt everybody involved. But still, he still made contributions. The passing and the defense were important, but he could not get a shot to fall inside the arc. And then Nikhil couldn't make a 3. He was 2 of 9 from 3 in this one, and I think both makes were his last 2, maybe at least 2 in the last 3. So I think he was 0 of 6 before that. Combined in the game, Dyson and Nikhil were 4 for 20 from the field. Your starting backcourt was 4 of 20, and you won and had good offensive numbers. That means everybody else was basically in a pretty good spot offensively. Nikhil, though, like to his credit, hit those 2 big threes in the fourth quarter, played good defense. 4 assists for him as well, was +1 in the game. Not his best game by any means, but he's been really good all year long, so no complaints here. Corey Kispert, 8 points on 5 shots, hit a couple big threes, had 2 assists. Kind of quiet. Not a guy that I want starting at small forward on my NBA team. But as I say almost every show, the Hawks have one small forward, and his name is Zachary Shishé. Is not available right now, so Corey is much more suited to the physicality of the 3 than guys like Kennard and Krejci. Okongwu, I mentioned before, but like it was a weirdly up and down game. So in the first half, he had that 8-point stretch that was massive when the Hawks were doing nothing. In the second half, he had 2 big shots. I'm remembering right now, like a big 3 to stop the bleeding on stuff. Ends up with 18 points, 9 rebounds, which is like totally fine. In 28 minutes, he was efficient. He had 18 points on 11 shooting possessions. Like all that's really positive. But he also had 6 fouls and 7 turnovers in the game, which is way too many for anybody, especially for a center. He had 2 blocks, but just like some really bad moments for Nako. So I don't even know how to analyze it. Like he was not particularly good in the game, but he was productive at times and ate a lot of minutes and was okay on the whole. And then Jalen Johnson was awesome on offense, like 32 points, 15 rebounds, 8 assists. One thing I will note right now before I forget is that Jalen is leading the NBA in defensive rebounds, like total for the season. He's number 2 in the league in per game defensive rebounds, behind only Jokic, which is fine. Obviously, the best player in the world, but not a small thing. So I'm about to say this. I gave that preface to say this. Jalen's defense was not very good in this game. There were a lot of mistakes from him. It waxes and wanes. It's been frustrating to watch as someone who cares about defense and thinks that Jalen has a lot of upside on defense. It's not been very good for a large portion of the season, but the rebounding is extremely valuable. Like he's been so good on the defensive glass all year long on a team that just has to have that does help everything. And then offensively, 32 and 8 assists, like he was really good for the most part, had the 1 bad turnover late, but other than that was like pretty spotless. He was 9 of 15 on 2s, 2 of 6 from 3, and 10 of 11 at the free throw line. So he was efficient. He was productive. My friend Howard Jones of ATL21, I mentioned this on Twitter today, and it's true. I mentioned that this team is just different when Jalen is playing this way, and that's been proven to be the case. When he was having his worst stretch of the season was in those 3 losses last week in a row, where he was just a non-factor, and the Hawks cannot afford that. And then in the Milwaukee game on Monday, he had a pretty bad first half. They got beat up, and they had an awesome second half, and they came back. And today, he was really good again, and they won. So, like, it's not always that linear, but it is kind of true. And Tyler's point was, like, when there's no one that can match up with him physically, he's going to overwhelm teams, and that's the case here. Like, there was nobody on the court for Memphis that could guard him. They were trying to put, G.G. Jackson on at one point in time. Jalen Wells is too small. Jaren Jackson is a good defender, but not like the best one-on-one guy against someone like Jalen. John Conchar, like they didn't really have the guy to put on Jalen. I think Jalen's eyes get bright when that happens in a good way, and he gets into attack mode. That happened here. So he was excellent, and he was the big star of the night for the Hawks, but there you go on that. Look, one more time, just a need that a win the Hawks just needed to have. That's very simple. It's not groundbreaking, but sometimes that's just the right answer. And unfortunately, they have a test on Friday that's going to be bigger than it was probably supposed to be coming into the season. The Phoenix Suns are 27-17. That is genuinely stunning to me, but it is. That's what they are right now. They have been a good team all year long, and they're coming to Atlanta for their annual visit on Friday. That's the Hawks' next game. I am planning to do a show on Thursday, so I'll save the kind of preview thoughts for that show. But an interesting test for the Hawks, who have been honestly, just a bad home team all year. The Hawks were 7-13 at home. That's crazy. So a nice test there in a game the Hawks need to win. But for now, the bleeding has stopped. The vibes could be a little bit better for the next 48 hours for the Hawks, and hopefully a lot to kind of wrap your arms around from the positivity of the way that Jalen played, the way the Hawks were able to get some stuff out of CJ and Kennard in this game, et cetera, and get a good road win. All right, everybody, that's all I have on tonight's podcast. Please subscribe to Locked On Hawks anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow me on Twitter if you'd like to, at BT Rowland, or on Blue Sky at the same place. Plus, the show is at Locked On Hawks, and follow my non-podcast work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody, that's all I have for this evening. Please stay tuned. We'll see you all next time.